I mean, that's in Asia and the Pacific, 200 million electricity. We are on track for Asia to achieve 100% electrification by 2030. That's good news. However, let's think about what is electrification. If it's just having a light bulb at home, this is minimum. We can have another TV set, fan, refrigerator at the different levels, but ultimately, I think electricity should serve and support cooling needs. The rising temperatures have led to actually increasing demand for cooling. Our friend expert in IEA expect space cooling, the needs for space cooling will triple by 2050 globally. So growing demand for air conditioning in the world emerging economies is expected to drive 64% increase in household energy use and produce 23 million tons of carbon emissions by 2040. This can cause overburdening of urban power grid and in turn contributing to climate change. So lack of access to sustainable cooling can impact on health, nutrition, and food security. In fact, we can read during this pandemic time, sometimes we can read news about lack of power in health clinics that can have a very, very bad impact on people during this difficult time. According to the another report, Chilling Prospect, Tracking Sustainable Cooling for All, 2019 by Sustainable Energy for All, some 1.05 billion people without access actually now at risk of in terms of public safety, health, safe medicine and food supply due to lack of access to cooling. I think among this number, 1 billion plus, there are 600 million people in Asia, our region. So it's also estimated that 23% of food loss and waste in developing countries is due to lack of cold chain. In fact, as we are speaking right now in Asia, in China actually, I read a report since last few days, Beijing is kind of experiencing another wave of, small wave of renewed cases of COVID-19, and the early indications saying that this has something to do with the cold chain. So this is an issue of requiring our attention, and this is a multi-dimensional issue we need to assess. So in today's deep dive workshop, we are aiming to provide us an opportunity to assess all these key issues, discuss innovative, cost-efficient technologies and business approaches, market opportunities, and identify strategies and solutions to bridge the gap, access to sustainable cooling across all sectors and all countries. Let me also take this chance to update you on what we do at the ADB, Asian Development Bank. Our lending to energy sector is about $5 billion per year. I must say access to electricity, renewable energy are a very big part of this, energy efficiency also. So far, the cooling as a topic, as investment project, we don't have many yet. So one of the purpose of this workshop is to see where are the market opportunities and how ADB can better support this access to cooling, sustainable cooling, as part of, eventually part of SDG 7, Universal Access to Clean Energy. Recently, actually last year, at the last year's Asian Clean Energy Forum, ADB launched the first innovation challenge for technology providers. We were inviting proposals for advanced and new technologies. One of these technologies was exactly in efficient cooling. We are currently evaluating the proposals. We have received over 30 proposals in this topic. We are selecting a winner and see how this can be implemented. We are also considering right now, at this moment, given the pandemic and the perceived risk with the centralized air conditioning, So we are considering to provide that regional technical assistance to study and assess the impact of centralized air conditioning to meet the hygiene and efficiency standards in our countries. So this has something to do with the cooling system, as you can imagine. With that, I would like to conclude by thanking you, all of our co-organizers, as Sustainable SEforALL, UN ISCAP, and UK BEIS, our partners, long-term partners. We appreciate your support and valuable inputs. I also thank all the participants coming from all over the world, as I can see from the poll, for your participation. I think that the key takeaways from this workshop would engender more concrete actions toward providing access to sustainable and clean cooling for all by 2030. And the target is formidable, and thus every step we can make to this end will surely count. Thank you very much, and looking forward to a productive discussion at this workshop.
Welcome everyone to the first session of this deep dive workshop. Thank you very much, Dr. Yongping, for the opening remarks. My name is Ksenia Petruchenko, and I'm an Economic Affairs Officer with the Energy Division of the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific. It is my pleasure to be the moderator for this session today on understanding access to sustainable cooling gaps in Asia and the Pacific and the link with energy access. We heard from the opening remarks that the need for cooling really is cutting across numerous sectors and activities of modern societies, such as food, health, buildings, transportation, data, agriculture, industry, just to name a few. Lack of access to reliable and modern cooling, which is widely prevalent in many developing countries, has severe consequences on people's daily lives and well-being. And the current situation with growing population, increasing urbanization, changing climate and its consequences, as well as the global health crisis caused by COVID-19 pandemic, clearly demonstrates the importance of sustainable and equitable strategies for cooling in order to follow the path towards the achievement of the Paris Agreement and Sustainable Development Goals. Therefore, it is important for country governments and expert community to ensure that the cooling plans and strategies which are being developed are aligned with the whole spectrum of people's needs for cooling. We are at SCAP are supporting SCAP's member states in achievement of SDG 7, as well as supporting on development of national cooling action plans with full aspect of cooling needs. And during this session today, we will discuss various aspects of the access to sustainable cooling, as well as the trends and the opportunities to improving the access to cooling with the focus on Asia and the Pacific. I encourage everyone to post your questions using the Q&A tab of the website at any time of the session, and we will address them during the course of this workshop. So without further ado, we will move to our first presentation, which will be given by Clotilde Rossi-Tissio, Energy Efficiency Specialist of Sustainable Energy for All, on providing sustainable cooling for all. Please, Clotilde, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ksenia. And thank you for the introduction also to Dr. Zai. So cooling is not a luxury. So indeed, having access to cooling and to all the services that can be achieved through cooling is necessary, as it means having access to fresh food, having access to medicine and vaccines, having access also to shelter from extreme heat. So SEforALL has identified 54 countries, of which 9 are critical, and 5 of these critical countries are in Asia, and also has been identified different group of population based on their access to cooling gaps, and also the risk at which this population are having based on their cooling access gaps. So we have been tracking this cooling access in the last years in our chilling prospects report. And we will be launching our next chilling prospect next month, but I'm showing today the numbers, the updated numbers for Asia. Am I? I'm trying to, yes. So the first group that is identified, which are at the highest risk, are the rural poor, which are around 109 million in Asia. And they're likely to be subsistence farmers that don't have access to an intact cold chain and might not have also access to also medical cold chains. These numbers are based on the access to energy, to electricity, and also poverty. These numbers have been decreasing in Asia, and also from last year to this year, that about 30 million less is 109 million. And this is due mostly to the positive trends in the increase of access to electricity, so the SDG 7 access numbers, and with major improvements foremost in India, but also in other countries such as Myanmar, Indonesia, and the Philippines. The second group, also at highest risk, are the urban poor, which are 484 million in Asia as of this year. This number has been increasing, and this trend is due to the continued urbanization and fast-growing cities in Asia. So it is about 12 million more than last year. This numbers is based on access to electricity and the share of urban population which lives in slums. In some countries such as Bangladesh, Cambodia, and Yemen, the share of population is more than 50%, around 55 to 60%. And this is, of course, a very alarming number. This population, which is at medium risk, is the lower middle income, is a very large group, is 1.8 billion. And these are at medium risk as they have access, they might be able to afford and to purchase an air conditioner or a refrigerator. But typically these ACs or refrigerator that can be purchased are the most affordable one, so can be inefficient and also can utilize refrigerants with very high GHG emissions. And this number has been not changing much, so it's 4 million, which is a big number, but compared to the 1,800 million. And indeed, there is a very high risk that this group poses to the grid as it's increased the energy demand, and also to the environment. So as was mentioned today, we are all here in this virtual event as we are here for COVID. So the world is racing to create new vaccines, but still the population is not fully vaccinated. So according to UNICEF, there are about 19.4 million under or not vaccinated children in the world. Of these, 5.8 million are in 5 countries in Asia. And these 3 are at highest risk because they don't have access. So they have big population that don't have access to cooling. And also cooling has a very strong impact on productivity. So 630 billion of economic loss was due to heat, or is currently due to heat stress in Asia. And with the effect of climate change, with more severe heat waves, there is a very high risk associated with job losses. And so by 2030, there is an estimated of 59 million of full-time jobs lost in Asia, in 8 countries, and 34 million jobs will be lost in India alone. So last year, SEforALL launched a need-based assessment. This year we will be launching a solution so that we can match the needs to the solutions. The solutions will be divided in 4 groups: technology, including also passive technology, services, including maintenance, and also operation cost, policy in terms of regulatory and incentives, and also financial, including also fiscal measures. And this will be also part of the Chilean prospect, will be launched next year, and more information at SEforALL.org. So thank you very much for the attention.
Thank you, Clotilda, for a great presentation and the overview of the complexity of the access to sustainable cooling and how different countries differ in their cooling needs and the impact on human life of the lack of access to cooling. It's also great to hear that SEforALL is working very hard on needs assessments and solutions tools for different countries. It would be great to get the updates when the publication is out. So with that, we also need to think how these solutions can actually be implemented at the country level and how they can be operationalized into the national policies. With that, I suggest that we move to the next presentation on the national cooling action plans for delivering the Kigali Amendment, Paris Agreement, and the SDGs, which will be given by Lily Reahi from the Energy and Climate Branch of Economy Division of United Nations Environmental Program. Lily is also the coordinator of the Cool Coalition, and we will hear from her about development of national cooling action plans. Please, Lily.
So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone, and thank you for inviting me here. So as we heard from the last two speakers, of course, cooling is very key to health and livelihoods. And I think it's always good to take a minute to actually imagine being in the shoes of somebody who really needs cooling. And there, I just want to take us back for a minute to imagine that you may be the rural farmer sitting here in this picture in India and trying to really make ends meet. And the lack of access to cooling means that you can't actually have all of your harvest reach the market because it spoils, at least half of it, according to the numbers we've just heard, spoils before it even reaches market. So whether you're this farmer or you're a nurse trying to deliver vaccines that hopefully will be developed under COVID-19 to remote communities, or deliver medicines, or you're just like sweltering in your office, likely at home these days during heat waves, cooling is clearly very key to protect us from, protect our health, our livelihoods, and productivity, as we've heard. So I think it's clear that we need to increase access to cooling to meet the 5.8, was it, or is 1 billion people that don't have access to cooling in globally, and I think a large portion of that being in Asia. But we have a bit of an irony in that if you increase cooling, and the more that you cool, basically, the more that you heat the planet. And so we heard a little bit about the numbers as well from Dr. Yongping, in that if you consider, for example, that by 2050, the numbers for space cooling alone, that doesn't include cold chain for vaccines and for medicine, is going to triple by 2050. I mean, that is, if you want to imagine what that number looks like, it's the equivalent of India's and China's power consumption today combined. And what that means is that not only is there significant infrastructure costs for countries that need this cooling, but there's also no way that we'll be able to get to a net zero net zero electricity system, because currently the demand for AC alone is outpacing the new share of solar capacity being added on an annual basis. So, and I don't need to speak to the emissions that come from that, because of course, most of this is currently met largely by fossil fuels, and conventional cooling at this time, just the carbon emissions are 2 times more, or 2 times the carbon emissions from aviation and maritime transport combined, which are huge sectors. So if we continue on this track, by 2050, the projections are that we will have a 90% increase in the GHG emissions from cooling sector based on 2017 baseline. So what that means is obviously that we really need to look at how we can increase access and do so in a way that still protects our planet. And I think we can do that through efficient and climate-friendly cooling. And the reason is that we have a very, well, not the reason, but one of the crucial drivers is that there was a large treaty signed, the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol, where 197 countries signed. And this is going to transform the cooling sector significantly. The phase down of hydrofluorocarbons, which are potent GHG emissions that are in the cooling sector, cooling systems, they are going to be phased down and to some extent out by the end of the century under the Kigali Amendment. That's a 0.4 degree of avoided global warming. Now, if we integrate energy efficiency, so improve energy efficiency of these cooling systems while phasing down these refrigerants, and we look to shift to renewables and reduce the demand in the first place for cooling, we can over double the climate benefits that we see here. And that would be equivalent to roughly, just from the energy efficiency savings, roughly 4 to 8 years of gas emissions savings. So that means that there's good news. We can deliver, but we really need to focus on this transition. Okay. So one thing, one of the key objectives of the Cool Coalition that was launched is to help accelerate this transition. And one of the key policy actions that we are working on together with many partners is to support countries with national cooling action plans. So why national cooling action plans? Basically, the reason is that a national cooling action plan gives a country a framework to link these HFC phase down plans to energy efficiency while doing it. And it allows a country to break the silos that are needed to be broken to actually address cooling in this comprehensive way and get the climate benefits. So looking at all the different policies in a country and looking at different ministries and actions that are being taken and linking that all into one policy framework is how we can achieve those climate benefits. And currently there's over 20 countries that are developing these with the support from Kigali Cooling Efficiency Program and several in Asia, as you can see here. And what we're working on right now is to, with the Cool Coalition and UNESCAP and KSAP in collaboration with all the different entities that have implemented national cooling action plans, is to develop a model that any country can use, because not only do we see it as a priority, but so does the Secretary General. So this is our work. And quickly to tell you what that looks like. So basically, one example that we're working with AEEE, which is one of the leaders in developing India's National Cooling Action Plan. And here, what you see is the National Cooling Action Plan is not only a policy document, but it's actually a process that allows a country to bring together the different people to develop this, to integrate efficiency and renewables into the cooling sector. So they, in India, had the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change ozone cell. Typically in the countries, the 20 countries, if you look at them, including in India, it often starts with the ozone unit because they have the cooling knowledge of the country due to the requirements under the Montreal Protocol. And then they connect with, they took the decision that they want to integrate energy efficiency with the refrigerant transition plans for enhanced climate action and also for improved access. So you had a leader, and then that leader created a very multi-stakeholder framework, which, as you can see here, involves many ministries. And they were really given ownership to drive chapters of this plan, to provide data, to provide what policies they can implement, and really take ownership together with civil society and industry. This is a really important point because this is what I mean by breaking silos. And all of you listening will know that Ministry of Energy, Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Transport, they're not always talking to each other, even if they're all acting on cooling. And there was a comprehensive approach. So many sectors were covered, not only AC, but also like cold chain, for example. And you see here that I have six sectors listed. So there was a baseline scenario developed, and then you have a future scenario. And what some key points that I wanted to pull out just for best practice are that, they did look at met and unmet demand. So they were trying to look also at what they could do to increase access. They looked at both active and passive cooling solutions, so it's not just active cooling. And they use existing frameworks in the country to monitor and implement the plan. So they set up working groups for each of the thematic areas, and then they had a steering committee that was already there based on the Montreal Protocol to track the progress. And what you can see here clearly is an example of the building sector, space cooling in the building sector. And you can see like how looking at a reference scenario and intervention scenario can really guide your policy decisions in the end. And the last point to make on this is that this policy document in India was largely based on existing frameworks and projects, and then looking at how to enhance the ambition of those policies. But it doesn't have to be a new policy document. It can build, if you're already doing maps and labels and all the different really good policies, you build on those for the intervention scenario. So with that, I'll wrap up. Sorry if I spoke a little fast. I was trying to get all the information in there. So just to say that we are developing this model national cooling action plan, and we would be happy if you'd like to be in touch to participate in the development and or to receive support on developing a national cooling action plan. And maybe one last point is that that I didn't mention is that we are integrating, so I had listed here the key things, but one of the things I want to mention is this model will be flexible, so it's adapted to the country's needs. It's not a cookie cutter approach. It is that the demand assessment will be multi-sectoral. We're trying to integrate access, working with SEforALL team, and also making sure that it's a living document so that it can be revised over time with technology improvements and developments. So with that, I will wrap up and say thank you. Please be in touch if you want any more information.
Thank you very much, Lily, for a great presentation and giving us the insight on the complexity of development of national cooling action plans and the importance of this framework document, as well as on the collaborative work which is going on the development of the model NCAP, which will be hopefully a great guidance for all countries who would like to develop this policy. With that, I would like to give the floor to our next presenter, Sabine Basniak, Senior Energy Efficiency Specialist from the Green Climate Fund, to talk about market drivers and opportunities in sustainable cooling. Sabine, please, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning. Thank you very much, Ksenia, and thank you very much, ACF, for having me here. So my topic is going to be on market drivers and opportunities. I think the way I would like to take this on is, on sustainable cooling, is to also link it to energy efficiency, because I've been working on energy efficiency for the last 20 years, and this is where I think it's more of a dovetail approach. And when you look at the market drivers, I think we also need to focus on the market barriers. When you look at energy efficiency and the market barriers, some of the key things that are not, moving energy efficiency and sustainable cooling are things like visibility. We need, the touchy-feely things to happen. when you look at sustainable cooling, what's the difference between a regular cooling versus a sustainable cooling application? So those are key drivers that we see, that barriers. And then also when you're looking at things like, prices, what's the price point? Price points between regular cooling equipment versus the efficient cooling equipment. How do you get around to that? Those are barriers, and those are barriers that we need to think about as well. And then the key part really is about knowledge. We need the people that are actually buying these equipments, setting up these systems, to really understand what sustainable cooling is all about. What is the benefit that they'll achieve? We heard so much from SEforALL and then from Lily on different things that are needed on the how effective cooling is. And I think everybody that buys an equipment or thinks about a sustainable solution really needs to be part of the story and can actually attribute to that story. I think that's the key part of it. And then one of the key things that I see in cooling as opposed to energy efficiency is, especially on the touchy-feely stuff, energy efficiency, it gets a little bit vague. But when you're, doing sustainable cooling, you get the cool effect. So therefore, there is some visibility there. Sorry, that was a bad joke. Okay. Having said that, I think this is one of the things that we've been trying to do at the GCF. I mean, for the last couple of years, I think GCF, we feel that, energy efficiency as well as sustainable cooling is a key driver, is a key energy climate change initiative that really needs to be rolled out much more effectively, and then to really kind of ramp it up. So just a brief history. I mean, so the Green Climate Fund was set up in at COP16, and then we've been in operation for about 10 years now. But in the 10 years, we've done about 129 projects spread across the world, and have a portfolio of $5.6 billion spread across, again, mitigation and adaptation. Just to kind of give you a picture, I mean, we are spread across the world again. Globally, all developing countries, with multiple projects all over the world. And then half of those projects generally tend to be in our mitigation portfolio, and then out of the mitigation portfolio, about half of that is also on energy access, energy generation, and energy efficiency. To date, we don't have a cooling project, but we have a pipeline of a couple of really cool cooling projects that are coming up, and I'll get to that in a bit as well. But just in a nutshell, I mean, our 5.6 billion has leveraged about $20 billion worth of investments, and we're looking at about 1.6 gigatons of CO2 avoided, and then serving about 353 million people. So before I can really understand GCF, I think you need to understand how we work. We do not directly invest. Like Dr. Yongping, on ADB, they basically put money into a country. We basically work with Dr. Yongping and ADB to actually get our investments done. So we actually work through different partners, and then we have a list of 97 partners that we work with, who we call our accredited entities. And these are the, oh, geez, okay, that was quick. All right, so I have 1 minute left. So what are we trying to do on the GCF is we think there's a two-prong approach that we want to go for. It's creating an enabling environment, and then it's about investments for that enabling environment. So the enabling environment is everything that Lily talked about, everything that Kutir talked about as well, is developing the maps, developing NCAPs on the planning phase, so that we build a good investment platform, and then go into the investment through our AEs to really put the money into action. And how do we do this? Is we have 3 financing windows at the fund. We call it the readiness money fund. Readiness is a technical assistance that's provided to countries. It's a $1 million per year. That's and every year you get a new $1 million. So this can go into actually the planning phases. So to start developing projects, to develop plans like the NCAPs, the maps, policy regulations, financial delivery mechanisms that need to be in place before we get to projects. And then we have the project preparation facility, which we provide to AEs to develop projects better, to actually go up, do the market studies, to do the financial analysis, to do gender analysis, so that the project becomes very strong. And then the big ticket item is our funding window, wherein we basically provide anywhere from $1 million up to $1 billion. Well, I think the largest that we have is, I think, 300 million project, but what we're looking at is really kind of developing projects in there. And then one thing I just wanted to kind of highlight is, I mean, what I come across in the last 2 decades, everybody's been saying there is no money for energy efficiency, there's no money for sustainable cooling, and I would like to disagree with that. There is a lot of money out there in the market. There's billions and trillions. The problem is the right type of money isn't there. We need to basically be cognizant of that and say, okay, does this project or this country need debt financing, or does it need equity financing? Does it need de-risking, or does it need a guarantee window? So that's the part that we're missing. And then I think this is where we as a group need to really come together and then figure out, okay, what is the exact need of the country and how do we make that money work for us? And I think that's the part that we are trying to stress at the fund as well, is to really use our instruments to really get that market going. So let me just skip over this on blended finance part. So what is our cooling initiative at the fund? Like I said, it's looking at 2 parts. Is the enabling environment part, where we're really looking at the thematic part of it, is really developing the plans, is developing the architecture, if you would, for the cooling systems to be set up in the country. And when Lily talked about NCAPs give you a visual of everything that's available in the cooling space. And then a country can basically say, okay, do I want to do everything, or do I just want to first tackle on, let's just say, product load, for instance. If we can reduce product load here, then that can lead on to, efficient cooling. So that's also a big part. And it does the efficient cooling. Does that mean supply chain, or does that mean, building efficiency? So, so then the country gets to think about how it implements this project. And then on the implementation side is to really work with our accredited entities, the ADB. I think ADB is the World Banks, and then all of our other A's that you saw there, to come up with projects that make sense. I mean, be it a singular project that just focuses on, for example, let's just say, cool roofs in Bangladesh, for instance. Or it could be a facility where, we provide an overarching facility with the AE to actually develop multiple types of instruments and multiple types of projects that really kind of, bring everything together. So, we're looking at things like super ESCOs. How do we bring super ESCOs into place? How do you bring distributors much more palatability so that they can start, investing more? And then, so we are looking at it from two parts again on the implementation. One is through our international A's, the ADBs, the World Banks, the UNEPs of the world. And then we are also trying to also go back into the countries, and then we have local partners in countries who are smaller in nature, but they're vetted into the country themselves. So they and to work with them and then tease out those projects and then see how to implement. But the key thing that we want to get to is we want to develop an enabling environment, but the enabling environment has to be implementable. It can't be a theoretical process in itself, but it's got to be a process where you generate the policies and the measures, and that results into implementation so that the people can actually see what's happening and how it's done, so that it can really take place and take foot and really scale up the whole cooling process. That is it. Thank you very much. I'm sorry I rushed through things. There's so much to say and so much out there and not enough time. But I'm open to questions, and my email as well. Thank you very much, Ksenia.
Thank you very much, Sabine. And I would like to thank all our speakers for doing a great job talking about very complex issues in such short time of their presentation. Today, we heard about complexity of the access to sustainable cooling in different countries, the importance of holistic methodology for development of national cooling action plans, and also about GCF approach to develop projects on sustainable cooling and importance of creating enabling environment which is also implementable, as well as about the need for the right type of financing for sustainable cooling projects. I know our participants have been very active in posting their questions, but I think we're a little bit over time, and we will have a Q&A session at the end of the workshop, at the end of the second session. So I suggest we move to the second session now and address all your questions at the end as much as the time allows. Thank you very much. Let's thank our speakers today for the first session. Thank you.
Great. Hi all. So we're going to start the second session now, and you've heard in the first session a lot about the context setting and also the links to energy access and some of the work some of the key organisations in this field are doing. What we're going to sort of do now is move on to. So I've just realised my my laptop's about to. Sorry about this, everyone. Give me 2 seconds. Sorry about this. Technical issues, as you can imagine, very likely to happen in a virtual event. But I was the first, so sorry about that. So yeah, I was just saying we're going to move on to session 2, and where we're going to talk a lot about the sort of solutions that are available. And I think when we're thinking about sustainable cooling, we want to think about it, beyond just energy efficiency. So we've heard a lot about the role of energy efficiency, but actually the cooling debate is very broad. It's cross-sectoral. It covers lots of different solutions. There's new ways of doing things. So I think the overarching theme of the Asia Clean Energy Forum this year is cross-sectoral innovative solutions for a sustainable future. So I think, in this session, we're going to talk about what are the innovative ways of thinking about, financing, technology, and other ways of doing and creating new value through sustainable cooling. So in this session, we'll have 3 speakers. So I'll be speaking first. I represent the UK government in the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. And then we'll move on to William Hudson from the Carbon Trust, and then Sam Grant from CLASP, and I'll introduce each one after each presentation. So just without further ado, I know we're a bit behind time, so I'll move on to my presentation. So I sort of get the option of introducing myself here. So to introduce myself, so I lead our sort of innovation for with international climate finance. So this is official development assistance, aid spending from the UK government's Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, which is for developing countries. And we've got long-standing partnerships with the Asian Development Bank and other multilateral development banks to deliver our aid money, such as in the Asia Pacific region. And what I'm going to talk about in this presentation is primarily looking at sort of the role of official development assistance, so the role of aid money to sort of support sustainable cooling, and with a particular focus on the Asia Pacific region. So just to give a bit of background context, I mean, we've heard some really useful figures in the previous presentations. I wanted to throw just a few more quick stats out there. So I don't want to repeat sort of what's come before, but some of the statistics on cooling are quite harrowing, really. When you look at them, that we heard about the 90% figure earlier in the first presentation, but if you put that into temperature, 0.5 degrees increase in global temperatures by 2100 just from residential air conditioners alone, and that's only one part of the cooling piece. And as we've heard from previous presentations, is very cross-cutting and cross-sectoral. But actually, there's only a very small proportion that actually goes to of official development assistance that actually goes to sustainable cooling at the moment. But then, the sort of the session topic for this session is really about, what are the solutions, what are the opportunities, and just to sort of put a few figures out there, the best available technologies that we have in the cooling space at the moment could avoid up to 460 gigatons of CO2 by 2060. I know I mentioned about energy efficiency. Energy efficiency still plays a really important role, and energy efficiency alone in the cooling debate could save up to 200 gigatons of CO2. And as you've heard in previous presentations as well, is very much a cross-sectoral issue. It's not just about energy efficiency of buildings. It's about how can we get enough vaccines. Sort of 1.5 million vaccines can be so deaths from poor cold chains can be prevented each year. So you've got the cold chain, you've got the energy efficiency in buildings aspect, you've got the cities, you've got health, as we've heard in Clotilda's presentation at the start from SEforALL. It's very cross-cutting, and that's what we want to sort of focus this session on. Just to move to the next slide, some sort of further opportunities, I guess, looking at the sort of Southeast Asian context, for example, is that air conditioning units are set to rise from 40 million units to 300 million units in 2040, half of which will be in Indonesia. So when we see sort of figures like this, we need to really think about what are some of the solutions that are out there. What's the most appropriate for the local context for a particular country or urban area or region or rural area. Energy efficiency standards will continue to be really, really important, as we've heard before. But also the role of innovation, so piloting innovative technologies, but also innovative business models. And we'll hear a bit later about the cooling as a service model in this session. Also, the role of behavior is also crucial. It's not just about technology and finance, it's also about consumers themselves. So what I wanted to quickly just sort of focus the second half of my presentation on, I've got, I think, a minute and a half or so left, so I'll have to be relatively quick. So in the UK, we have international climate finance that's delivered through different UK government departments. as a part of that, we have sort of an uplift was announced last year to 11.6 billion of official development assistance for climate-related aspects from 2021 to next year onwards, and that delivers the UK's share of the 100 billion PA finance commitment under the Paris Agreement. And as part of that, we've ring-fenced, and this was announced in September, 1 billion of that will be for clean energy innovation specifically. And innovation is also a core part of the Asia Clean Energy Forum this year. Now, I'm not going to go through every single sort of program that the UK government has that's related to cooling, but I wanted to list it here, and you'll have access to the slides afterwards through the website. So you can look at these sort of in slower time, and also feel free to contact me if you'd like sort of more information. But I just wanted to list some of the different programs, and as we heard again from previous speakers, particularly Sabine and the GCF, similarly we deliver through partners like multilateral development banks. So a number of these programs you see listed here are delivered through them. We also do a lot of work through the Montreal Protocol as well to try and phase down the use of hydrofluorocarbons, and the UK's phase down target 79% between 2015 and 2030. So just to move on to my last slide, because I'm running out of time. So just wanted to sort of highlight really what previous speakers have said as well about the roles of important initiatives that are out there. And just to add some more, we're working very closely through mission innovation to sort of accelerate obviously clean energy innovation, but as part of that cooling, there is an innovation challenge on cooling, and we're looking at the next phase of mission innovation at the moment. Also, we're members of the UN Cool Coalition that you've heard about already. And as part of COP26, we've got a big focus on energy efficiency, and you'll hear from the UK Minister for Climate Change and Corporate Responsibility in a closing plenary on Thursday, where he'll talk more about innovation, the clean recovery process, and COP26. So you'll hear more from him on Thursday. So with that, I will finish my presentation, and I'd like to hand over to our second speaker, which is William Hudson, who is the head of the Southeast Asia branch of the Carbon Trust, who will speak about the cooling as a service, this business model that I mentioned briefly just now. So I'll hand over to William.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. Thank you very much, Peter, for the introduction. Right, so my name is William Hudson. So I head up the Carbon Trust Southeast Asia office based in Singapore. The Carbon Trust is a not-for-dividend sustainability consultancy. So we specialize in all things low carbon. That's policy, technology, and finance. And we have been in Singapore now for just over a year. And the focus of our activity so far has been on setting up one of the UK government's regional programs, so the ASEAN Low Carbon Energy Programme. So that programme has two main topics. So one is green finance, the other one is energy efficiency, and the Carbon Trust is leading on the energy efficiency work across the region. So very exciting times. As part of that work, we've been looking to develop pilot projects for EE across the region. And as part of that, we've been looking for interesting new innovative technologies, business models, and financing models. So cooling as a service is a topic that's been coming up a lot, and it's something we've been looking to push through this program, and we will continue to do so. So moving on, so what is cooling as a service? So cooling as a service, CaaS, is an innovative new business model, and it's effectively around technology suppliers providing cooling equipment and installing it for free, so no upfront payment to the customer, and it's a pay-per-use type model. So in effect, the customer will pay a fixed cost per unit for the cooling that they receive, and those units are based on the amount of cooling consumed, so whether it's dollars per ton hour of refrigeration or cubic meters of cooled air that they consume. And the cost that's levied to them includes all of the equipment costs, the installation costs, the operations and maintenance, as well as the profit margin for the supplier. And the advantage of that is that it's very transparent. It's agreed beforehand. with the customer, and a standardized contract can be put in place with a tailored solution offered for each customer. So effectively that transforms what is a traditional product-focused business model into a service-focused one, so servitization, if you like. And there are a few different advantages of that. So the fee per unit of consumption is higher for the customer than they pay with a conventional cooling ownership model. And what that does is provide a really good incentive for the customer to minimize their consumption of electricity for cooling, which is good for energy consumption reduction and it's good for emissions reduction. And equally, there's a strong incentive for the service provider to take a circular economy whole life cycle approach to managing those installed assets. And the idea there is that it's in the supplier's interest to keep electricity consumption low, given that they pay for that electricity consumption themselves. And that really helps to maximize the value of the equipment over project lifetimes. The CAS model is similar to ESCO model. So many of us are familiar with ESCO models. The key difference is that this is not a paid from savings model. This is a model which is based on a pre-agreed cost per unit of cooling consumption. And why is all this interesting? The reason it's interesting that we've heard about already, so the cooling market is growing very rapidly at the moment. So the IEA has told us that electricity use from cooling is projected to increase from around 10% of total electricity consumption globally to nearly 30% by 2050. That's a huge market. So we're looking at $6.9 trillion over 20 years. And that's around $230 billion per year. And 90% of that investment cost is going to be linked to the operation and maintenance of the equipment, so making sure things are running as efficiently as they can. But the focus to date has been much more on the capex of the equipment, so how much does it cost up front? And this incentive has really meant that customers have been focused more on cheaper or less efficient equipment than they should be. And cooling as a service helps to address that. So in terms of how the model works, so I've been through this to some extent, but you can see a diagram on the right-hand side. So in the middle is the technology provider. So they provide their CAS service, the cooling as a service, to the customer, and in return they receive periodic, usually monthly payments. And for that, within that service, you would always install and maintain the cooling equipment. You do that off balance sheet, which is good for the customer, and you would also pay for the electricity consumed. The customer has no upfront costs. As I mentioned, there's no performance risk to them, and they make periodic payments, as I mentioned. The bank or the financier would provide the equipment, they would purchase the equipment from the technology provider via a sales or leasehold type model. And they would then receive lease payments from the tech provider to the financier, which gives them a steady lease payment cash flow. That is just one possible financing model. There are others, and the SPV or special purpose vehicle model is another one that's being discussed. In terms of barriers to cooling and the benefits of CAS, so I've mentioned some of these, but typically, and this is a common energy efficiency barrier, cooling is not the core business of customers. So the benefits of CAS are that it's a fully outsourced service. And I mentioned that the incentive is to provide high quality, energy efficient equipment. Another barrier is the upfront CapEx cost for the customer. So with CAS, there is no upfront CapEx cost. That frees up CapEx for other investment priorities, which may be more aligned to the core business of the customer. Uncertain energy cost savings is another barrier. Benefits of CAS cost savings are not part of this agreement, and instead pre-agreed cost per unit for cooling is the model, and that allows for both a steady cost stream and a steady revenue stream, depending on whether you're the customer or the supplier. Another one is around the perceived risk or lack of trust in new appliances or cleaner refrigerants. The benefits of the CAS model are that you are not exposed to those risks. So the supplier would look after both the technology and the refrigerant. Another barrier is that O&M often doesn't occur with clean cooling. The benefits of CAS is that there is an incentive for the supplier to provide the O&M and do that well, and they can make really significant savings as a result. And finally, it's around the difficulty in putting together the business case based on those other initial barriers. So the benefit of CAS is that really the incentive is driven by the market here, so you don't need to put in place artificial incentives. Less government intervention is needed. There are still relatively few examples of CAS out there, but many of us have heard about the good work that's being done by both BASE and KSEP through their CAS initiative. And there's various pilot projects going on around the world. I won't talk about them, but the countries highlighted include some of those target countries. And the work includes awareness raising, financial modelling, standardising of contracts, and these pilots. I would say that there's a big gap in Southeast Asia at the minute, and that's the reason that we have been quite interested through our programme to look at CAS in more detail. And there are lots of actions for scaling CAS going forward. In different stakeholder groups. So with governments, the role really is around raising awareness and providing TA where the private sector has been unwilling to do so far, leading by example through procurement, acting as a coordinating entity with different stakeholders. With NGOs and donors, such as ourselves, it's more about creating the right alliances to support that stakeholder collaboration, providing knowledge, acting as a coordinating entity again, supporting demonstration projects. And as I mentioned, we're looking to do that through our low carbon energy programme sponsored by UK government. For industry, it's about working with financiers to standardise CAS contracts, as well as piloting new projects and setting up appropriate monitoring, documentation and billing. And for financiers, it's about, again, standardising these contracts and making them simple, increasing investment into CAS-linked businesses, and considering finance mechanisms that can support CAS better. I mentioned briefly the sale leaseback model. There are others as well, including guarantees. So through our programme, we will be running EOIs for all different types of energy efficiency projects across the region over the next year or so. And in particular, we have EOIs being launched in Thailand and Malaysia in the next month or so. So we very much welcome proposals around the CAS model. Yeah, and that's me. Please get in touch if you have any questions. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Will, for that great presentation. And I think the cooling as a service business model is really innovative, and I think these are the sorts of ideas that we need to try and to really look to scale sustainable cooling solutions across the world and in the Asia Pacific region. So now I would like to pass over to Sam Grant, who is the director of the Clean Energy Access of Clean Energy Access, from CLASS, to speak about clean cooling technologies and market-based approaches to scaling up the deployment of cooling technologies.
Thanks, Peter, for that introduction. Thanks to the participants for joining us in dialogue on this critical topic. I'd like to try to touch upon market development for air conditioning units, refrigerators, and fans. And if we have time, I'll move on to cold rooms. So CLASS has two primary goals. One is to mitigate catastrophic climate change through appliance efficiency, and the other is to increase access. We recognize that access to cooling, among other energy services, is a human right. We work to try to increase that access for the underserved. We develop policy tools such as minimum energy performance standards, comparative labels, endorsement labels, bulk procurement specifications, and we develop these cooling policies as an instrument to scale the availability and accessibility of highly efficient cooling technologies. We partner with policymakers, consumer interest groups, technical and market experts, and others to design and implement these standards. And we feel like they form the bedrock or the foundation for that enables the market to scale. In terms of just take a quick look at India's air conditioning market. air conditioners are energy guzzlers with low ownership rates and growing demand, as many of the other speakers have pointed out. Less than 10% of Indian households have a room air conditioner to provide them that kind of thermal comfort and cooling. However, the number is increasing pretty rapidly, and this is higher ambient air temperatures, urbanization, and rising incomes and living standards are all increasing to this rapid increase in ownership. We see that room air conditioners are, contributing to increasing both overall electricity demand from the commercial and residential sectors, and to demand during peak hours in urban and semi-urban areas. So this graph here just gives a quick indication of the growth in the market, we've got relatively low market average energy efficiency ratings as of 2011, and then we'll see that policies for room air conditioners have scaled the penetration of highly energy efficient inverter technology. So since the introduction of a labeling program for inverter room air conditioning units in 2015, registration for this technology has increased substantially from 14% of the total market share to 50, almost 54%. And the Bureau of Energy Efficiency, really contributed to driving these impressive results, which have led to avoidance of 215 megatons of CO2 emissions. And so CLASP manages several programs that identify and promote high quality, efficient, and affordable appliances. These appliances and machinery, support households and businesses that are underserved by grid electricity to meet their basic energy needs, achieve greater productivity, improve their quality of life, and promote gender empowerment. So CLASP serves as the secretariat for the Efficiency for Access Donor Coalition, which its members include leading aid organizations and foundations committed to accelerating the universal access to modern energy services through the improvement in efficiency of appliances and the reduction in their cost. So one of the programs under the Efficiency for Access Coalition, funded by UK Aid under the LEA program, is the Global Leap Awards. And through the Global Leap Awards, we seek to identify best-in-class off-grid appliances. We develop testing baselines for these appliances. We have an international call to manufacturers to submit products. And then we bring those products to scale in specific geographies through results-based financing. And we use this to catalyze different markets. So we've run this competition for a variety of different appliances, fans, TVs, refrigerators, solar water pumps, electric pressure cookers. We've run 2 competitions for fans and refrigerators. And for each of these products, we develop unique testing processes specifically tailored for off-grid appliances. The test method evaluates durability, service delivery, and energy efficiency. So the Global Leap Awards has been run 2 competitions for refrigerators, roughly over the last 2.5 years. And running the 2 competitions, we see as really a minimum in program design and is essential. The first awards program really just sets a baseline for the market and provides companies clear targets in terms of price and performance that they can compare their products against. And as you can see from the graph, we saw a 28% energy efficiency improvement for Global Leap Award winners between the first competition and the second, and a 12% improvement for all participating products. So this is really encouraging for us, and we know that there's a lot more work to be done in terms of improving efficiency, and especially when you look at the price. So we saw a slight reduction in price between all finalists in the first year and the second year, but these prices are way above the market samples that we took. So there's lots more that we can do. We've tested over 70 off-grid refrigerators, which we house on our Equip Data website, and we continue to test refrigerators through the Efficiency for Access Coalition and the LEA program. Now I want to shift just quickly to fans. Fans often get overlooked in the cooling discussions. Through the Global Leap Award, we tested over 120 different fans. We've run 2 competitions, and through funding from NDEV, we were able to provide results-based financing where we pushed over 200,000 kind of super efficient, best-in-class off-grid fans into the Bangladeshi market. And we just completed an impact assessment where we spoke over the phone with 1,600 users of those super efficient fans, and we got some really profound impact results. 94% of fan owners said that it extended the time that they were productive by an average of 2 hours and 20 minutes each day. 92% noticed improvements in the health of their family, reductions in dehydration and heavy perspiration. 90% of the customers surveyed powered their fan with a new or existing solar home kit, which enabled them access to other energy services such as phone charging, TVs, lights. I think most telling was that 89% of the families surveyed said that they would recommend the fan to others. So a really high consumer satisfaction rating. I'll stop there because I'm at time. But yeah, please reach out if you have any additional questions about these programs. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Sam, for the presentation, and it's great to see the work of CLASP and to hear about particularly the successes in the Global Leap Awards, which is a really innovative initiative to really sort of develop improvements in efficiency and try and really develop new solutions. It's really great to hear about that and the work of CLASP. So I'm aware we're sort of want to have enough time for the Q&A, so I'll hold sort of Q&A until that session. But I just wanted to add that for this workshop as a whole, we have developed an evaluation form, so you'll be able to access that through your current links at the moment to this session. But the evaluation form will help us to look at what sessions you find useful and how we can sort of look at the forward look as well for how virtual events work. So you'll see sort of a separate form uploaded. So without further ado, just so we can have enough time for the Q&A, I'd like to hand over to Jessica Brown, who's the Executive Director of KSEP, the Kigali Cooling Efficiency Programme, to do the summary remarks for this session.
Thanks so much, Peter, and great to be part of this wonderful panel with so many folks around the world working on this really wonderful and critical topic. We've heard so many great remarks from the speakers. I wish I had time to summarize some of the great statistics that many of you said. I wrote down many of these notes. I'll definitely be using them again. We heard from many of our speakers, Asia is absolutely a critical region for us to focus on. It's critical because of lack of access to cooling that we see in various countries in this region, but also because we know that cooling puts huge pressure on the power grid when it's available and adds huge weight on families and company budgets. We heard from Will at Carbon Trust that cooling is currently at 10% of electricity use, and it will grow to 30% of total electricity in coming decades. I mean, that is just absolutely staggering. So making cooling more affordable, more efficient, more climate friendly is absolutely critical for Asia's environmental and economic sustainability, as it is for global economic and environmental sustainability. So what I wanted to do is just give a forward look in terms of cooling, what I think is going to happen in the coming years as it relates to efficient climate-friendly cooling. First, I really see that the world is waking up to the importance of cooling as a major climate mitigation sector in a way that it hasn't in previous years. This is primarily due to the huge unprecedented growth in demand that we're seeing, particularly in Asia, particularly in South Asia and Southeast Asia. The growth, coupled with hugely inefficient technologies that are available on the market, despite the fact that there's best available technology that are being produced, the inefficient products that are being sold just make this a huge problem, but the opportunity is very ripe. There's huge mitigation potential here, and the world is finally waking up to this mitigation potential. And I do think that we're going to see much larger amounts of official development assistance, public finance flowing to support cooling programs in the coming years. We heard from Peter, we heard from Green Climate Fund, from Sabin, Asia Development Bank, other MDBs are going to start contributing to this problem. It's really great to see, and I know there's going to be an increased focus in terms of national planning, policies, market-based solutions, and market-based incentives coming on board. And I also think that the world is waking up to the links between cooling and peak demand and peaker plants. So the folks in the climate community that have been really fighting the peaker plant battle for years are realizing that that work cannot be done without solving the cooling challenge. And nowhere is that more true than in Asia, particularly Southeast Asia. So there's going to be more of a coming together of the different elements of the climate community. I think the folks that are really working on the peaker plant issue, as well as the cooling issue, which I think is going to finally be a critical way to start chipping away at that big problem. Secondly, I think we'll start to see a lot more innovation happening in this space. There's already been a huge eruption in smart technology and financial and business model innovation. And we're seeing, of course, demand response programs. Cooling as a service has been a huge business model innovation that KSIP has been supporting. I think we're going to see that expanding even more. KSIP has been really impressed by Rocky Mountain Institute's Global Cooling Prize, what they've been able to achieve in terms of pushing the envelope with technological innovation with domestic air conditioners in India. And I think we can apply that similar type of innovation and award program for other types of technologies within the cooling sector in the coming years. Third, the confluence of the growing number of extreme heat events and the COVID financial crisis, I think, means that countries will need to start investing in more passive cooling solutions that are economically a bit more feasible to start dealing with the urban heat island issues in cities. Cities are only getting hotter, they're getting more crowded, and passive cooling solutions like solar reflective roofs and tree planting are pretty inexpensive solutions for cities to start tackling that extreme heat challenge. And the fourth and final point I wanted to make is that minimum energy performance standards, I think, are going to continue to be the necessary backbone for everything that we do on cooling in the Asia Pacific region. There's been a number of really positive examples of regional harmonization that have taken place in Asia, as well as some Pacific islands adopting industrial country standards within Asia Pacific and Australasia as well. So there's some great examples of work that's already gone on, and that's going to continue to be an absolute necessary trend in the future. And just I'll mention from KSIP's perspective, We are now working on our strategy for the second phase of our program. So we are going to be fundraising for the next 4 years of our philanthropic giving program, which will run 2021 to 2024. And I'm very happy to say that our some of our geographic priorities are in Asia, where we will focus most strongly in India, China, and Southeast Asia. We will continue to focus on a suite of sustainable cooling solutions, passive, mechanical, et cetera, and we'll maintain a focus on industry, policy, finance, and access to cooling. And in particular, we're really hoping to find some solutions on efficient, clean cold chain financing, particularly in India. That's something that we think is a critical gap that needs to be solved for. We would really like to scale up cooling as a service as an innovative business model. We'd love to help roll out minimum energy performance standards and regional harmonization of standards. And we would also like to begin seeing countries get serious about passing and implementing access to cooling policies, either at a city or state or even a national level in countries with populations who are really at most risk. So I'll stop there for my remarks. And just to echo what Peter said earlier, to remind everyone, there is a quick evaluation questionnaire for the workshop that I know would be great for everyone to fill out. So if you could please just reserve a few minutes to fill out that questionnaire, that would be great. So now I think we are opening it up to Q&A. So I'll pass it over to Clotilda, who I think will be moderating those questions. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Jessica. And thank you to all the speakers that posted a number of questions. I will take the first one as it relates to the first presentation and how climate change affected the need of demand for cooling. There is here an example on how an electric fan used to be enough and now air conditioner is necessary. So climate change has been increasing the average maximum temperature, the number, also the peak temperatures and the number of hot days in many regions. For this, it has increased the need for cooling and is expected to further increase in the year to come. There has been a very powerful cover of The Economist showing that constantly this has been happening for the last 20 years, how the average temperature has been increasing. I'm trying then to group the questions, and I'm very aware that we have only 11 minutes left. So there are a number of questions that relates to specific technologies, and in particular to technology based on heat cooling transfer and management, in particular on how cold storage can be utilized, and also how efficient solution can be applied to cooling and solar thermal based cooling. So I think I will open up to all the speakers to reply to a specific solution or technology they think is particularly promising and could also be related to a financial solution, a policy solution, or their final remarks, so that we get a chance to hear from the speakers again in the last 10 minutes. So I think we could go in the same order we spoke just to make it more fluid. So I would like to ask Lily to go next.
Sure. In terms of the most promising policy, I mean, I think I spent over more than my 5 minutes allotted on what I see is very promising and fundamental as national cooling action plans. I think if we don't start there with linking the HPMP plan, refrigerant transition, to energy efficiency, we are not going to get the maximum climate benefits that we are trying to achieve by taking a comprehensive approach to cooling. So I think we need to start there, and then within that there's a significant amount of important policies. I would of course highlight minimum energy performance standards, cooling as a service, sustainable procurement. I mean, there's several that I think are very important. Building codes. But if I had to pick one, I would say we really need to start with the national cooling action plans.
Thank you. Ksenia, do you have any remarks or any take on technology or policy for increasing?
I think I will let our speakers speak first, but and if I will have time, I will make a remark at the end. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Sabine, you want to go next? Please
sure.
feel free to jump in, as I don't want to call anyone.
I'm sorry. Yeah, no, I think policies and technologies are vitally important, but I think at the same time, I would say any policies, everything from maps to cooling as a service, everything is very important. But what I would like to really stress is there is a finite amount of public sector finance that's available. There's a finite amount of MDB financing available. To make sustainable cooling happen, we need to get private sector involved. And to get private sector involved, we need to get that enabling environment set and active. And I think that's why I think the NCAPs, the MEPs are so important. And then that's why I think any innovative financial models that we use now to test the pilot, so that we can start de-risking the whole cooling space is very, very critical. So I would say in a nutshell, it is getting the financial flows moving, and then but at the same time we need those enabling environments to be in place so that the private sector feels at ease and so that they can start investing properly. And then, like I said, there is money out there. It's just about getting that money de-risked and into the right type of projects that we think are right. Thank you.
Thank you, Sabine. Peter, do I have a specific take on a technology or any final remarks you would like to share?
So I guess, not sort of specific technology, but I think, Sabine took the words out of my mouth, really. I would very much echo that it's about how do you create the enabling environment to get the private sector flows going, and the role of sort of innovation in that. As I alluded to in my presentation, obviously innovation is important, but it's how you do the full chain. How do you scale innovative pilot technologies? How do you get the right type of finance, which is going back to something Sabine said as well in his presentation. I'd say that's really important. But as the other speakers have said, it's the whole picture. So you need the baseline energy efficiency performance standards. You need those. You need to look at the full picture of the sustainable cooling debate, as it is very cross-sectoral and cross-cutting.
Yes, thank you very much, Peter. Can I ask also Sam, class point of view, as you have the stronger experience with technologies and you provided in your presentation?
I guess, yeah, it's hard to pick one. I guess for the purposes of this workshop and my presentation, I think I just reiterate the importance of fans and not forgetting about fans and the role that they play in providing thermal comfort. 40% of rural Bangladeshi households don't own a fan. So there's quite a big gap there, right? And power intermittency, across the region makes solar powered fans really attractive. And really, fans are a low cost item, right? They're much cheaper than air conditioning units, so they have the potential to provide cooling solutions for the poor, right? So that we don't leave them behind. With improvements in brushless DC motors too, we could actually see the super efficient fan market driving economies of scale and brushless DC motors, creating cost economies for other appliances that are using those motors, which would be an added benefit. So I say fans.
Thank you very much. Will, can I ask you also if you want to speak again on cooling as a service, or also I recall that Carbon Trust has been working also on district heating cooling systems. So I wonder if you want to touch on this possibility.
Yeah, thanks, Clotilde. No, it was really great hearing from Jessica about some of the KSAT priorities. So So just to sort of recap on those, so getting serious about access to cooling policies, I have nothing to add there, that's absolutely clear. On the MEPs, yeah, so we know in ASEAN, there's a lot of work being done on air conditioning through the ASEAN Shine program. And I feel like there's a really good opportunity to expand that. So the obvious second choice for me would be refrigeration. And lots of work to be done on upgrading refrigerators across this region, I would say. And on CAS, so the cooling as a service, yeah, I really agree that it's about getting the finance channel to the right people, the right stakeholders within the CAS model, and de-risking as well. So working with banks and working maybe with insurance companies on guarantees and things like this. But I would say that the CAS model is a really nice one, as in it feels as if it's something the private sector could pick up and run with relatively quickly with relatively limited support compared to some other solutions. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. See still question coming in, some of them also related to ice batteries as sink for electric for solar PV. So also on the point of view, on my point of view, I think that there are a case-by-case solution. So, and the first approach would be then to see how passive solution and the demand for cooling can be decreased. And then I see actually the stronger bottleneck not on the technology side, but more on providing access to financial solutions and opportunity as a cooling as a service that can make technologies more approachable, if not even affordable for most. So thank you very much. Reading here through. So I would like to thank you all, and please, Jessica, if you'd like to add some additional comments, your final remark.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one comment just in relation to the comment about policies. I was just thinking about this because KSEP recently put out a new report with CDP looking at some of the biggest cooling equipment manufacturers, and we found two things that were quite interesting. The executive summary of the CDP report is on our website if folks are interested. One finding was that of these biggest cooling companies, none of them were putting enough money into their R&D budgets. The average was about 2% of overall revenue, where the producer goods average is at 3.5%. And the other is that there's a huge difference between what the companies are selling in terms of what they put on the shelves and what they actually have available in terms of their best available technology. There's a huge gap in terms of the efficiency. So in terms of what they sell in the market, what they sell in the market and what they sell on the shelves is much lower efficiency compared to what they actually could sell with their best available equipment. So from that perspective, minimum energy performance standards as a policy tool is absolutely critical to push the manufacturers to get the best efficient products on the shelves and to increase their spending in terms of R&D. However, we've found that through our work within countries working on MEPs, the regulators say that they won't push the policies unless the manufacturers are on board with an increase in standards. So there tends to be a bit of a catch-22 there. The way that KSEP has approached it in a few countries, it's a little bit of an experiment, but this applies directly in the Asia-Pacific region. We're trying this by providing some technical assistance and tech transfer to some of the smaller and medium-sized manufacturers, specifically in Vietnam and Thailand, to see if once they get the support and improve their energy efficiency, if they will then agree to higher efficiency standards to effectively get the manufacturers on side as a way to improve the efficiency standards. So I just wanted to share that experience because I think it's really important to show the role of efficiency standards working with manufacturers to drive the market, the products that are available in the market up. So thanks for letting me share that.
Thank you very much, Jessica. And Dr. Zai, do you have any closing remarks? We are slightly over time, but I'm guessing maybe 1 more minute still there. I cannot hear you. I don't know if.
I have a minute. I just say I learned so much from all of you, and I cannot summarize with this short time. But I'll just say one thing: that if I look over my window, seeing Manila, I can see slums, but also high-rise buildings. Within these high-rise buildings, there's freezing, inefficient air conditioning. That's very cold. But in the slums, that the people don't have access to decent, life as needed. So I think that we have to do both, improving the efficiency of the centralized air conditioning, but at the same time providing basic cooling access to our people. So I want to conclude on this point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we are very much on time, I would say. So I would like to thank you all, all the participants, remind you again regarding the evaluation form. We will really appreciate your feedback, and looking forward then to see you all in person at the next year Asia Clean Energy Forum then.